Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this week's video we wander the church of St Kenelm and Minster Lovell Hall in Witney, West Oxfordshire. Most medieval ruins in the UK are either castles or monasteries. Halls are much less common, but Minster Lovell Hall is a fine example, a grand manor house that was constructed around 1440 and occupied for nearly 300 years, before being abandoned and partially dismantled. The setting of the hall and church are in the pretty village of Minster Lovell, and share the quintessential English village backdrop that we see in the movies or in TV series. Although the hall is charming, there are stories that darken the site and leave tales of mystery. So why not join us as we explore Minster Lovell Hall? There has been a manor house here at Minster Lovell since at least the 12th century, but the major part of the ruins that we see today are those of a large new house built by William, the 7th Baron Lovell in the 1430s, after his return from the French Wars. The manor of Lovell was granted to the Lovell family by Henry I, sometime before 1124. William Lovell was one of the richest men in England, who built his house as a demonstration of his wealth. William's son John, a prominent Lancastrian and servant of Henry VI, was rewarded with the position of Master Forester of the neighbouring royal forest, Wychwood, whilst John's son Francis, the 9th Baron, who served the Yorkist cause, was created Viscount Lovell by Richard III. Following the defeat of the House of York in the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, the hall passed into the hands of the Crown, and eventually, after being owned by, amongst others, of Henry VIII's grooms, William Compton and Henry Norris, in 1602 it fell to the possession of the lawyer Sir Edward Coke. His descendant Thomas Coke, later the Earl of Leicester, in 1728 became Lord Lovell of Minster Lovell. The most impressive hall in our opinion is the large Great Hall which we're in now, the walls of which rise up to 12 metres high and have stunning traceried windows, from which the Lovells would have once gazed out from. West of the hall and separated from it by the width of the room, that would have formerly have been used as a parlour with a chamber above, lies the north-west building. The east and west walls of this structure still stand. In the 19th century, an attempt to convert it into a barn led to the collapse of the roof, whilst a fireplace in the north wall is evidence of the subsequent construction of a cottage within the walls. Behind the gates is a great hall porch, the porch which is approached from the north usually by a patterned cobbled pathway has suffered the effects of being exposed to the elements, but internal plaster still survives within the vaulted roof. Decorative details can also still be seen, giving an impression of the splendour of the building when it was newly constructed. The east wing of the manor house comprised the stable, kitchen and the other service buildings, and the outline of these structures can still be seen as we walk around the grounds. The kitchen hearth is still visible in the thick south wall of the kitchen, while close to the west wall is the old well. The stone floor of the stable survives, and the wide passage between the stable and the kitchen formed the principal entrance to the courtyard and house. In the west wing, surviving foundations together with stone water tanks and channels suggest that these buildings were later used as a tannery. The manor was briefly held by Hugh Despenser, favourite of King Edward II, during the infancy of the third Lord Lovell. Sometime around 1431, William, the 7th Baron, began building a new house by the river to replace the 12th century hall. It would be an early example of a new style of architecture, based less on defence and more on comfort, with ranges of richly furnished buildings centred on a courtyard. Francis was created Viscount Lovell in 1477, but after he fought on behalf of Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, his estates were seized by the Crown. For a time, the Minster Lovell estate was held by Jasper Tudor, uncle of Henry VIII, and then by a succession of tenants. The 4-storey tower at the southwest corner probably dates to the period of Francis Lovell's ownership in the late 15th century. Francis was the last Lovell to reside at Minster Lovell Hall. He was a firm favourite of King Richard III, who made him a Viscount. Other courtiers resented Lovell's influence over the king. In 1485, Lovell supported Richard III against the rebellious Henry Tudor. The story goes that when Richard was killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field, Lovell fled to his manor of Minster Lovell, where he hid, rumoured to be in a secret chamber in the southwest tower. The chamber's existence was known only to an old and trusted servant, who brought his lord food and drink. When the servant died suddenly, Lord Lovell's hiding place became a tomb. As the rebellious lord was left to slowly starve to death, unable to get out of his sanctuary, it is said that the piteous moans of Lord Lovell can be heard amidst the ruins of his family home to this day. Could it be true? Probably not, for the story did not emerge until early in the 18th century, when a new staircase was being constructed. A skeleton was found, sat at a table with a dog at his feet, within a previously hidden room. There was a book, papers on which a hand rested, and a pen, which all turned to dust when the air was emitted. Perhaps he intended to write his story, but if so, it was never read. Another legend tells of one of William Lovell's brides, who disappeared during a game of hide and seek in the hall on her wedding night. The mistletoe bride, as she's known, talks of a happy lady on her wedding day, on Christmas Day, who wanted to celebrate by playing a game about the hall. She chose to hide in a chest in a remote attic, and the lid would fall closed, locking her in. Her family and friends were unable to find her, and eventually they gave up the search. Years later, a servant found the body of a girl dressed in a bridal gown, well preserved in a heavy, cool chest that was normally used for food storage. Presumably she had hidden in the chest and had been unable to get out. Now her ghost is said to roam the ruins of the hall in a dark and sad manner. At the beginning of the 17th century, it passed on to the Coke family, who occupied it until their wealth and power outgrew this quiet corner of Oxfordshire in the mid-18th century, and they moved to Holcombe Hall in Norfolk. As Romanticism influenced culture at the beginning of the early 19th century, the hall became a place of pilgrimage for the new culture tourists of modern England. And, as was common in these times, they would scratch their names into the walls to mark their presence. In fact, it's only relatively recently that it's been frowned upon. It's worth taking some time to really look around for the graffiti that's etched into the walls. Some date back to around the 18th century, and it's just a very interesting thing to be able to see today. The hall is a wonderful example of what wealth would have looked like back in the day. But the atmosphere there is just something else. I can see why this hall is reputed to be haunted, and that it's a popular site for paranormal investigators who want to experience the otherworldly. But if you're visiting like we were during the day, the site is very calm and peaceful. It's a beautiful place to explore. You can even do a spot of wild swimming in the river just beside the hall. Of course, a trip to the hall is not complete without venturing next door to St. KENELMS Church. The church's dedication to St Kenelm would suggest Saxon origins. The earliest known record of the church, however, is from 1183, and the present St Kenelms is a rebuild of the 15th century. St Kenelm was a Saxon prince, and the name Minster in the name of the village suggests that the village may have had a Saxon minster. The suffix Lovell was added to the name from the 13th century, when William Lovell held land here. The church is very quiet, beautiful and peaceful, and not to mention large. A tomb effigy of Lord Lovell lies here peacefully, and is the main focus as you walk through. The highlight is the alabaster tomb to William the 7th Baron. It's quite beautiful to look at, with the tomb laying on a chest, decorated with heraldic symbols that relate to his family connections. There are also carved figures of St Christopher and St Margaret on the base. The high wooden ceilings are very impressive to see too, as are most of the decorations in here, including the original 15th century seating in the nave. The base of the walls behind the chancel arch probably dates back to the original 12th century church and is the oldest part of the building. The striking reredos behind the altar were installed in 1876 in memory of Lady Taunton, the wife of Sir William Taunton of Freeland, who owned Minster Lovell Hall at the time. This is a lovely piece of high Victorian art, with 5 panels of finely carved sections of biblical scenes. And finally, St Kenelm's church has remained virtually unaltered since construction in 1450. It was built on the foundations of an earlier priory minster, which explains the unusual cruciform shape, with the impressive central tower in the middle. The central tower rests on 4 great pillars, with a fan vault over the crossing. Each of the pillars have carved corbel heads that have a likeness to Lord and Lady Lovell and Henry VI. Just above in the windows and around the church are fragments of medieval glass that have been gathered in several of the window panels above and represent various saints. They aren't very noticeable on the camera, but it's definitely something to look out for when you're visiting, as is the 15th century carved font that makes quite the statement piece in the middle. The church just concretes the sense of simplicity and peacefulness, which can be said for the hall next door and for the small village too. Minster Lovell is a pretty special place worth visiting if ever near the Cotswolds. So that's it for this week, and we really hope that you've enjoyed our visit today and it's given you some inspiration for another place to check off your list. If you've enjoyed it, please do hit that like button, click on that subscribe button, and even consider clicking the notification bell to keep updated with our videos. We want to say a big thanks to our channel members and Patreons of the channel. And if you're interested in supporting us further, then why not have a look in the description box for ways to join us. So we'll see you in the next one. Till next time.